During the Industrial Revolution, the colonies of Canada began building railways. Railways increased trade, made traveling easier and shorter. They helped towns and cities grow and created hundreds of new jobs for Canadians. By the early 1860s, Canada East, Canada West, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia each had their own railway, creating over 3,000 kilometers of track. The only problem was, there was no railway connecting the colonies together. In response to this issue, the Canadian Pacific Railway was born. The Canadian Pacific Railway was formed to unite the country from sea to sea. Canada's Confederation on July 1st, 1867, brought together Canada East, Canada West, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick to form a new country. Part of the deal with the maritime colonies was to build a railway connecting these provinces with Quebec and Ontario. This railway, that connected the country in 1867, was the first section of the Canadian Pacific Railway.
Manitoba joined Canada in 1870, and British Columbia intended to join in 1871. British Columbia would only join if the government promised to build a railway to connect the province with the rest of Canada within 10 years. The Canadian government agreed. Although their leaders had agreed, many people in the new country did not share this belief. They believed that it was an impossible task. Private railway companies did not want to waste money on a task like this. John A. Macdonald had to convince them to help. He offered the companies government money and free land. This will make them very rich, so they all began asking for a contract to build a railway. In 1872, there was an election, and John A. Macdonald's Conservative Party needed money to help win. Sir Hugh Allen, a very rich railway company owner, offered the Conservative Party $300,000. This is money the Conservative Party won. With this money, the Conservative Party won the election. John A. Macdonald gave the contract to Allen's company to build the Canadian Pacific Railway.
Macdonald gave the contract to Allen's company to build the Canadian Pacific Railway. Because of this, many people believe that Macdonald's government was guilty of bribery. This created the Pacific Scandal, and Macdonald was forced to resign in 1874. The Conservative Party lost the election, and the Liberals came to power with Sir Alexander Mackenzie as their leader. The Liberals did not intend to rush the CPR since there were other economic problems to solve. The government also had little money for the big job. Although no building was done, surveyors were sent into the Canadian West under Sir Sandford Fleming to make a route for the railway. During his term, Mackenzie and his party needed to decide on a terminus for that railway. At that time, Vancouver was just a little village on the shores of the Pacific Ocean. In the summer of 1878, Mackenzie announced that the terminus would be Port Moody, a small village east of Vancouver. Over the next few months, Vancouver thrived into a town and then a city. The Mackenzie government finally decided on a route and slowly began building the railway. The task was extremely dangerous, and only 100 kilometers of railway was built. The government was out of money and needed a company to take control of the project.
In 1878, another election took place, and the Conservatives, with John A. Macdonald, returned to power. In February 1881, the government agreed to terms with a company called the Syndicate. The syndicate consisted of collisions of wealthy men that intended on making money by carrying goods and people across Canada by train. The syndicate consisted of Sir George Stephen, president of CPR and the Bank of Montreal, Donald Smith, the previous head of Hudson Bay Company and negotiator with Louis Riel, J.J. Hill, and others. The contract stated that they would build and operate the railway from Callander, Ontario to Terminus. The railway would be completed in a decade. The syndicate would get $25 million cash, $35 million in loan, and 25 million acre of land. The money would be kept by the company and the land sold to the settlers. There would be no tax on railway stations, grounds, or buildings. The company would own any other railway built part of the transcontinental system. No other railway would be built south of the CPR for 20 years.
The CPR was finally headed on the right path, but there are still many speed bumps along the way. The first speed bump came when the first general manager was fired at the end of 1881 of construction season. With the new position up for grabs, the extremely talented American William Van Horn was lured in and took charge of the line from Ontario to Calgary. He boasted so that he could complete 800 kilometers of main railway line during his first year. Floods delayed the first start of his construction season, but at the end he completed 673 kilometers of main line. This made the vision of the Great Transcontinental Railway more of a reality. Under Van Horn, the life of the railway worker was difficult. At the crack of dawn, the workers got out of their tents and had breakfast. They then worked for 5 hours and had a lunch break.
After lunch, they worked for another 5 hours before supper. On some occasions, they continued work after supper. Each worker had a different job that contributed to the railway. Some workers placed rails while others fastened fish plates, bolts, and spikes. Others built the stations that were 12 kilometers apart. There was a lot of gambling and drinking amongst the workers, so the RCMP began following them and keeping the peace among the workers and the company officials. They stopped all drinking and gambling as well. This helped speed up the process of building the railway. Everyone was content with the progress that the railway was making. There was only one group of people who were unhappy about the railway, the farmers of the West. The CPR company could charge them however much they wanted for carrying the farmers' prairie grain to the market.
With the eastern stretch nearly complete, the more difficult and dangerous part of the railway was left to be built, the British Columbia and Mountain Stretch. Andrew Underdog, an experienced American engineer, was in charge of the western construction. The job included blasting tunnels into the sides of the mountains, getting workers and supplies across the harsh terrain, and building 600 trestles and bridges, all within the budget. There were not enough workers in British Columbia to complete the huge task. Underdog brought 7,000 immigrant workers from China to help. By 1885, there were 15,000 Chinese immigrants working on the railroad. They were eager to come to Canada to start new lives full of hope. Instead, they had to do the dangerous tasks that the Canadians did not want to do, including blasting the mountains with explosives, making tunnels, and working on the high cliffs. More than 600 Chinese workers died from this, and their hopes and dreams of a better life died with them. Chinese workers were paid only $1 a day, while their Canadian peers were paid $1.50 to $2.50 every day. They had to pay more for their food, and many suffered from hunger, cold, sickness, and racism.
The company faced other obstacles like the treacherous Selkirk and Rocky Mountains and the indestructible Canadian Shield north of Lake Superior. Fortunately, the company was able to finalize the eastern part in time to send troops to fight in the Northwest Rebellion. On November 7, 1885, a crowd of workers and owners gathered in Craigellachie, the place where Onderdonks and Van Horn's railroads met. Donald Smith, an original member of the syndicate who had given a lot of money to the railway, pounded in the last spike. He failed his first attempt and bended the spike, but hit it the second time cleanly. The Transcontinental Railway was finally finished and 6 years ahead of schedule. Van Horn made a short speech and the crowd erupted in cheers that echoed through the mountains and could be heard for miles and miles.
Railway building brought thousands of Chinese immigrants to Canada the hope of new life. When the railway was finished, the government discriminated against Chinese who had helped build the railway and did not wish for them to stay in their country. In 1885, the Canadian government began charging a head tax of $50 on every Chinese immigrant arriving to Canada. In the next 25 years, the tax became $100 and $500 per person by 1902. This stopped Chinese from immigrating to Canada. Yet, still there was 5,000 Chinese living in the young nation. The tax was abolished in 1924.
People across the nation have always believed that the CPR was one of our greatest achievements. It brought the nation together to complete this near impossible feat. The CPR united the nation from sea to sea and proved to the Americans that the land north of the border was ours. It was able to carry many people, mail, and goods across the nation, increasing trade and bringing settlers to the west. Towns along the railway like Winnipeg and Vancouver blossomed into huge cities. Canadian troops could be transported across the nation to defend it.
The Canadian Pacific Railway has continued to thrive and has helped the nation in many ways, such as in the two world wars. It continues to act as the glue of our nation, connecting the provinces and territories, truly making our country a nation from sea to shining sea.
The CPR was finally headed on the right path, but when there were still many speed lumps... Oh.
Nice.
I said lumps instead of bumps. The CPR was finally headed on the right path, but there were still many speed lumps. Oh god. Oh my god. I can't. Oh. The CPR was finally headed on the right path, but there were still many speed lumps. Oh jeez, I can't do this.
Speed bumps.
I know. Ron!
Sorry.
Stop! I'm trying to record! Oh my god, I wasn't even recording. It's not funny, oh my god. Production season. With the new position up for grabs, the extremely talented American William Van Horn was lured and took in charge oh Jesus Lord. Season. With the new position up for grabs, the extremely talented American William Van Horn was lured. Oh God! Can't do this! 23 kilometers of main line. This made the vision of the Great Transcontinental Railway. Oh,
Okay, watch the Vsauce video first.
Oh my god.
1878, another election took place, and the Conservatives, with John A. Macdonald, returned to power. In February 1881, the government agreed to the terms with a company called Oh my god. Why does complicated words need to be involved? They were racist.
Railway building affects